Millionaire sneaks out to see Mistress at night. Pregnant wife leaves with their child on the spot. Have you ever wondered what secrets lurk behind the walls of a perfect mansion? Meet Andrew Kensington, a charismatic millionaire who appears to have it all: a thriving business empire, a sprawling estate nestled in the prestigious Bel Air neighborhood, and a beautiful wife, Samantha, who's expecting their second child. But beneath the veneer of luxury and marital bliss lies a heart-wrenching betrayal. Night after night, Andrew slips out under the cover of darkness, leaving Samantha distraught and suspicious. And in a single, explosive confrontation, her worst fears come true. Stay tuned to discover the scandalous twists of this gripping family drama. Andrew Kensington was a name that frequently splashed across financial magazines and business news networks. At just 37 years old, he had become the CEO of an expansive real estate and tech conglomerate, Kensington Enterprises. Everyone who met Andrew for the first time found him magnetic, tall, broad-shouldered, with a practiced confidence that made one feel that anything was possible if he was at the helm. Yet for all his public glory, Andrew was at heart a complicated man. He was married to Samantha Kensington, formerly Samantha Wilcox, who had been his college sweetheart. Samantha, 35, was in many ways Andrew's complete opposite. While Andrew possessed that larger-than-life aura, Samantha was gentle and modest, preferring quiet nights with family over posh galas. Their marriage had all the makings of a timeless love story. Two bright students from the University of Southern California, bonding over study sessions, Sunday brunches, and volunteer work at a local animal shelter. Andrew's ambition propelled him through the ranks, eventually bringing him wealth beyond his wildest imaginings. Samantha, meanwhile, chose to pursue a career in early childhood education before becoming a stay-at-home mother after the birth of their daughter, Lily. Their daughter was now 4 years old, a lively child with Andrew's mischievous grin and Samantha's soulful eyes. Lily was the light of the Kensington household, a wide-eyed little girl with curly dark hair who brought sparkles of joy to every corner of the mansion. Samantha loved being a mum, and at 6 months pregnant with her second child, she was thrilled to give Lily a sibling. Everything about Samantha's life seemed golden: a massive home in Bel Air, doting grandparents on both sides, an affectionate sister named Elena Garcia, who visited often, and a circle of friends that grew wider each year. Yet, anyone paying close attention might have noticed subtle cracks forming in the glittery surface of her life. Andrew was often away on business trips, leaving Samantha alone in that sprawling mansion. The staff housekeepers, a nanny, and a driver took care of Samantha's everyday needs, but they could never fill the emotional space Andrew vacated. Samantha grew used to lonely dinners in a dining hall fit for 20. Nights often turned into restless, anxious hours waiting for Andrew's text messages confirming he'd landed safely or that he had a late conference call. One evening, Samantha began feeling twinges of doubt. She recalled the way Andrew used to look at her like she was his entire world. Now, though, something about his eyes had changed. They had grown distant, as though part of him was perpetually elsewhere. Even Lily's excited shrieks of "Daddy's home" did not light the same spark in him. Samantha tried to banish her suspicions. Life could be stressful for a man controlling a multi-billion-dollar empire, she told herself. Stress did that to people. Still, every so often, Samantha would find strange receipts in Andrew's pockets from restaurants they never visited together, or see cryptic text messages flash on his phone. This gnawed at her heart. She once confronted him gently. "Is everything okay at work? You've been tense," she'd say, stroking his shoulder. Andrew always brushed it off as the typical concerns of a busy executive. When Andrew received a phone call one night and, moments later, claimed an emergency meeting had popped up at midnight. Samantha's heart pounded. A midnight meeting in downtown Los Angeles, so urgent he had to leave at once? She felt her stomach churn as she watched him go. The staff pretended not to notice anything amiss, though Samantha was aware of hushed whispers whenever Andrew set off on these nocturnal escapes. She saw the sympathetic, pitiful looks in the maid's eyes. Something wasn't right, and in her gut, Samantha could feel a storm brewing. She never imagined, however, just how violent that storm would be, one that would tear apart her illusions of a perfect marriage and launch her into a world of heartbreak, betrayal, and resilience she never thought possible. Samantha woke the next morning with a heavy heart. Sleep had eluded her after Andrew's late-night departure. She tossed and turned, feeling a smouldering ache in her chest, but she told herself she needed proof before making any assumptions. After sending Lily off to preschool, Samantha ventured down to the breakfast room. The staff, too polite to show open concern, maintained their usual deference. Andrew, for his part, was not at the table. He rarely was anymore, especially on nights he worked late. Samantha forced a slice of toast down, her stomach rebelling with morning sickness and anxiety. The pregnancy felt more daunting than ever, physically draining, with her back aching, her feet swelling, and her hormones making her more sensitive to every shift in Andrew's behavior. That day, Samantha decided to visit her sister, Elena Garcia, who lived just a short drive away. Elena was a pragmatic soul, the type who faced problems head-on with unwavering courage. After Samantha's chauffeur dropped her off at Elena's modest but cozy home, she felt her shoulders relax a fraction. Elena's place was a far cry from the Kensington mansion, no grand fountains or acres of manicured lawns, but it had warmth and a sense of genuine comfort. The sisters settled on a cream-colored sofa, with Elena's cat, Biscuit, perched on top of the couch, tail twitching as though he sensed Samantha's tension. "Spill it, Sam," Elena said as she offered her a glass of water. "You look pale." Samantha tried to steady her voice, but the words came tumbling out. She told Elena about Andrew's frequent absences, the midnight phone call, the suspicious receipts. Though she had no concrete proof, every fiber of her being screamed that Andrew was up to something beyond ordinary business concerns. Elena listened, her expression grave. "Have you asked him directly?" she asked, flipping her straight black hair behind her shoulder. Samantha sighed, feeling tears prick at her eyes. "Yes, he always says it's work-related, or that I'm imagining things. And maybe I am. Maybe I'm just hormonal, but something isn't right." Elena tapped her chin thoughtfully. "You're not crazy or paranoid. You're pregnant and sensitive to the shifts in your environment. Andrew's changed, Sam. I've seen it in the way he barely talks at family gatherings. He's always checking his phone. You're telling me you found receipts that don't make sense. You know him best, trust your instincts." Although this conversation lifted some weight off Samantha's heart, just having someone believe her the sense of dread lingered. That very night, Andrew came home close to 2 a.m. with no explanation other than long negotiations with an important international client. He stripped off his tailored suit and fell into bed, not noticing that Samantha was wide awake, tears silently streaming down her cheeks. A few nights later, Samantha's suspicions solidified. She woke in the middle of the night to a dull hum, only to see Andrew slipping out of the bedroom door. The corridor lights were off, and outside, in the silver glow of the moon, she watched from the window as Andrew climbed into the driver's seat of his midnight blue Maserati, speeding off without so much as a backward glance. That brazen departure cut into Samantha's soul like a blade. She didn't even attempt to sleep again, her mind spinning, conjuring up the worst of possibilities. In the morning, she resolved to act. Samantha called a personal contact, James Carter, a private investigator known to Elena through a mutual friend. James had helped Elena once, when she had a former landlord refusing to return her security deposit, and he came highly recommended for discretion and thoroughness. Samantha never thought she'd stoop to hiring a detective to watch her husband, but desperation overrode her pride. When James arrived, Samantha asked for absolute secrecy. She gave him the dates and times Andrew usually left the house, and handed over photographs of Andrew's Maserati and the addresses of all his offices. James, a stocky man with kind eyes, listened carefully and asked questions that made Samantha's pulse accelerate. How often does he leave at night? Are there any particular patterns you've noticed? Does he have a personal assistant who could be covering for him? James inquired, scribbling notes in a small leather-bound notebook. Samantha answered as best she could. When he was satisfied, James promised to begin surveillance immediately. "I understand the sensitivity of this situation," he said, voice steady. "And I promise you whatever is happening, you'll get the truth." That night, Samantha paced the floor of her bedroom, waiting for Andrew to return. To her surprise, he came home at a reasonable hour. He offered no explanations, no apologies, just a weary yawn. Samantha tried to read his expression, searching for any sign of guilt or regret, but his face was as inscrutable as polished stone. She found it chilling that he could be so calm. The next morning, a series of texts from James appeared on her phone. Each text carried an electric jolt of fear and inevitability. "I have something," one read. "Need more time to confirm," stated another. Samantha could barely breathe, let alone eat or focus on her prenatal care. All she could do was wait for the day James would present her with the evidence that would shatter her marriage. Within a week, James Carter gathered enough intel to shake Samantha's already fragile world. The private investigator requested a meeting at a discreet cafe in West Hollywood. Samantha, anxious to avoid any run-ins with people who knew them, wore sunglasses and a simple navy blue dress that concealed her growing baby bump. When she slipped into a corner booth, James was waiting, his face somber. "I'm sorry to have to do this," he began, placing a thick folder on the table. "But it looks like your suspicions were correct." Samantha could hardly speak as she opened the folder. Inside were photos of Andrew in restaurants, at a luxury condominium complex, and most heartbreakingly, kissing a woman with long chestnut brown hair. The woman appeared younger than Samantha by a few years. She was tall and elegant, with an immaculate sense of style. Her name, James revealed, was Victoria McNeil. She was a marketing executive for one of Andrew's subsidiaries, a budding influencer often photographed at swanky events. Samantha could only stare, tears threatening to spill. Where were these taken?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. James pointed at the pictures. "That's a lounge in Beverly Hills. And this one here is the driveway of a condo in Century City. From my observations, Andrews visited her place 4 times this week, always after midnight. He stays for a few hours and then leaves around dawn." Samantha's stomach churned. Her eyes lingered on a particular image of Andrew holding Victoria's hand as they walked into what looked like a chic rooftop bar. He was smiling in a way Samantha hadn't seen in a long time, relaxed, even joyful. The pain was immediate and visceral. "I can get more details if you want," James offered gently. "But from a professional standpoint, you have more than enough evidence." "I'm sorry." Her throat felt parched. "No, thank you. This is enough." Driving home, Samantha wrestled with conflicting emotions, betrayal, heartbreak, anger, and a strange, numb acceptance that all of this was, in fact, real. It was as though she had stepped outside of her own life and was peering in from a distance, powerless to change what she saw. That evening, Andrew returned from another business meeting. Samantha confronted him in the living room, the photos scattered across the marble coffee table. He froze in the doorway, color draining from his face. Time seemed to stand still in that moment. Lily's laughter echoed from the upstairs nursery, a gentle reminder of the life that was about to be torn apart by the reality of these images. "How long?" Samantha asked, her eyes brimming with tears. She could barely keep her voice steady. Andrew's gaze darted around, seeking a lie, an escape, some rationalization. Finally, he released a tremulous sigh. "A few months," he admitted. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this." Samantha's voice cracked. "A few months? How long have you been lying to me? Sneaking out at night? Does she know I'm pregnant?" Andrew ran a hand through his hair, unable to meet Samantha's eyes. "She knows," he mumbled. "It's complicated, Sam. I was under so much stress. I never wanted to hurt you. Never wanted to hurt me," Samantha said, her tone sharper than she'd ever heard it. "You lied to me for months. You've been with another woman while I'm here carrying your child, Andrew." She expected Andrew to fall to his knees, to plead for her forgiveness, to swear this was a mistake. Instead, he offered a series of half-hearted excuses: stress, midlife crisis, a search for excitement he felt he had lost in their relationship. Each word was like salt in a gaping wound. Samantha's breaths grew ragged. She placed a hand on her belly as though to shield her unborn child from the ugliness unfolding. "Get out," she whispered. Andrew looked stunned, as though he hadn't anticipated her anger. "Samantha, let's talk about this. Let's figure it out," she laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. "Talk about what? You sneaking out in the middle of the night to be with her? This entire pregnancy I've been suffering alone while you've been having the time of your life, from the looks of it. Go to her if that's where you want to be. I'm done." And so Andrew left, though he didn't go far, only out to the guest house in the estate's expansive grounds. His pride wouldn't allow him to leave the property he believed was rightfully his. But for Samantha, that night was the beginning of the end. The illusions were gone, and there was no more pretending that Andrew might simply be overworked. The mistress had a name, Victoria McNeil, and a face. Her husband had a secret life. Samantha spent the next few days in a haze. Andrew was still on the property, albeit confined to the guest house, and Lily was the only reason Samantha maintained any semblance of composure. Their daughter was too young to understand why Daddy was suddenly sleeping somewhere else, but she sensed the tension. She asked questions with all the innocent curiosity of a child. "Did Daddy do something bad? Why don't you eat breakfast together anymore?" Samantha's heart shattered each time she had to force a smile and divert Lily's questions with, "We're just giving Daddy some space, sweetheart." In the daytime, Samantha busied herself with prenatal checkups, meeting Elena for lunch, and sorting through some philanthropic obligations she had committed to months before. At night, she cried silently in her room, replaying the last few months of her life like a broken record. She longed for the days when Andrew would sweep her into his arms after returning from a business trip and regale her with exciting stories of corporate deals he'd sealed in Hong Kong or Tokyo. She missed the moments of spontaneous affection, the weekend getaways to Napa Valley, the quiet evenings they used to spend watching old black and white movies. Now, every time she saw him pass through the corridors of the main house to greet Lily, or make a phone call in the study, her chest tightened. Andrew seemed reluctant to pack his things and leave entirely, as if staying in the guest house preserved some modicum of control over his marriage and family. Samantha began to realize that Andrew was no longer the man she married. He was protective of his reputation above all else. She suspected that to him, admitting to family and friends that his marriage was collapsing would be a blow to his image. Perhaps he also genuinely felt guilty for hurting her, but not guilty enough to let go of Victoria. One afternoon, as Samantha was reading in the sunroom with Lily, she overheard Andrew's voice from the hallway. He was on a phone call. She tensed, listening for the mention of Victoria. Instead, she heard him discussing a new acquisition deal with someone named Richard Thompson, one of his key business partners. The tone of Andrew's voice carried a tension Samantha recognized he was feeling cornered, not just in his personal life, but also in his professional dealings. Lily, unaware of the adult drama swirling around her, continued to color on a sketch pad. Samantha wondered if it would be best for Lily to take her somewhere else, away from this suffocating environment. 2 days later, Andrew cornered Samantha in the living room, looking oddly hesitant. The pride in his eyes dimmed. "Sam," he began, "I think we need to talk about how to move forward." Samantha folded her arms protectively. "Move forward? I asked you to leave." Andrew frowned, frustration flashing across his face. "Look, I can't just leave everything. I have responsibilities here, my daughter, our unborn child, and the business that's run from this property. I still love you, Sam. Believe it or not, I do." She resisted the urge to scoff. "You love me so much, you were willing to sneak around with another woman." His eyes flickered. "I am confused." Victoria she is a distraction, an escape, but it's not that simple. Samantha closed her eyes, pinching the bridge of her nose. She could feel her baby moving inside her, a tiny reminder that life was still forging ahead, no matter how broken she felt. "Well, it's simple to me," she managed. "You made a choice. You betrayed me. You think I'm going to just stay here, pregnant and humiliated, so you can have your cake and eat it too?" I may have once been that naive, but I'm done. Andrew took a step closer, his voice trembling slightly. "I want to be involved with the baby. And Lily. I don't want to lose my children." Samantha's eyes welled up. For a moment, she saw a flicker of sincerity in his gaze, a glimpse of the Andrew she used to know. "I won't deny you your children," she whispered, "but you've already lost me." The conversation ended there, abruptly, painfully. Andrew returned to the guest house, and Samantha was left alone in the mansion that now felt like a prison. She knew the staff whispered about the tensions, that they darted sorrowful glances at her as she passed. She began packing small items, not quite sure if she was ready to leave, but needing some sense of control. As she folded Lily's clothes and her own maternity wear, she told herself that she needed a plan, a real plan, to escape this toxic environment. News of Andrew's affair eventually reached the ears of their families and close friends. Perhaps the staff had let something slip, or maybe Elena had confided in a friend who confided in another friend, and so on. Before Samantha could contain the damage, her parents, Robert and Carol Wilcox, arrived from San Diego, visibly distraught. Robert was a retired police officer, fiercely protective of his daughters. He nearly pounded on Andrew's door in the guest house, demanding an explanation. Samantha had to intervene to keep her father from escalating the situation. Carol, on the other hand, spent hours by Samantha's side, stroking her hair as she wept. Meanwhile, Andrew's own parents, Nicholas and Penelope Kensington, were outraged at the scandal threatening to tarnish the Kensington name. Though Nicholas was known to be a staunch traditionalist and stern father, he condemned Andrew's infidelity. Penelope tried to broker a reconciliation, her pleas delivered in a voice quaking with suppressed fury. For the Kensingtons, the facade of perfection mattered above all, and Andrew's affair with an employee was the worst kind of public relations nightmare. In the midst of these familial confrontations, Victoria McNeil made her presence known in the media. A few paparazzi photos surfaced online, capturing Andrew and Victoria in Beverly Hills, further fueling rumors of his extramarital escapades. Samantha shuddered each time she saw Victoria's name or face on social media, often accompanied by lurid gossip columns speculating about Andrew's loyalty to his wife. The headlines were as sensational as they were cruel. Is Andrew Kensington trading in his marriage for a younger flame, or pregnant wife left alone? The Kensington scandal deepens. What cut Samantha deepest, though, was Andrew's lukewarm defense of her. The press releases from Kensington Enterprises simply stated, "We do not comment on personal matters," while Andrew's own social media remained carefully curated photos of corporate events and philanthropic initiatives, nothing indicating the chaos at home. Samantha's only solace came from Lily, who remained blissfully unaware of the complexities and cruelty of adult life. Every night, as Samantha tucked Lily into bed, she read her a fairy tale or sang a lullaby, hoping to preserve this fleeting innocence for as long as possible. But the stifling tension was taking its toll on Samantha's health. At her next prenatal checkup, her doctor expressed concern about elevated blood pressure and advised her to minimize stress. "You need to rest, Mrs. Kensington," Dr. Patel said kindly, adjusting the stethoscope around her neck. "Stress can lead to complications." Samantha forced a smile. She wanted to laugh at the absurdity of the advice. How could she possibly rest when her world was caving in? Returning home from the clinic, she found Andrew pacing in the foyer, a scowl etched on his handsome features. "We need to talk," he said tersely. "I'm not in the mood to hear your excuses," Samantha replied, sidestepping him. Andrew placed a hand on her arm, a touch that made her skin prickle with conflicting feelings. "It's about the board of Kensington Enterprises. They're worried this scandal will harm our image. They want me to address the rumors publicly." Samantha fixed him with a sharp gaze. "So, now you care about how this looks to everyone else? You didn't care when you started sneaking out to see Victoria, but you care now that your precious empire is threatened." He exhaled, frustration evident. "You think I'm proud of what I've done? I made a mistake, Samantha interjected. "Sneaking out, night after night, hooking up with the same woman for months, that's not a mistake. That's a choice." He opened his mouth to argue, but no words came. Samantha brushed past him, heading for the stairs. She felt an intense wave of dizziness, her blood pressure surging. Clinging to the banister, she willed her heart to calm down. Stress was the last thing she needed right now. As the days dragged on, the standoff continued. Andrew remained on the property, while Samantha holed up in her bedroom, trying to shield Lily from the drama. The tension boiled over when one night Samantha heard Andrew's voice rising from the living room. She crept out to investigate and found him arguing with Victoria on the phone. The fury in his tone took her by surprise. "I told you this is complicated," he shouted, pacing back and forth. "I can't just announce our relationship to the world, especially not now. My family, my wife, is in turmoil." A cold realization dawned on Samantha. Andrew was torn between preserving his carefully crafted public image, trying to keep the mother of his children from leaving, and placating Victoria, whose ambitions were evidently overshadowing her discretion. Samantha let out a bitter laugh. The man she once believed was her rock had become a stranger, trapped in a web of his own making. She moved quietly away from the living room and into Lily's bedroom, where her daughter was fast asleep, dreaming peacefully. That night, as she watched her child's serene face, Samantha resolved that she had reached her limit. Her baby was due in a few months, and she refused to bring another life into this oppressive environment. She would leave, with or without Andrew's blessing. The moment had arrived to protect herself and her children. Early the next morning, Samantha woke with a sense of grim determination. She placed calls to her parents and her sister, explaining that she intended to leave Andrew, at least for a while, and needed somewhere stable to stay. Elena immediately offered her home, but Samantha was concerned that her sister's two-bedroom bungalow might be cramped with a newborn on the way. Her parents, on the other hand, had a larger residence in San Diego, enough space for Samantha and her children to find sanctuary until she decided her next steps. Samantha gathered documents, her marriage certificate, Lily's birth certificate, her medical records, and enough clothes for her and Lily to last a few weeks. She also took out a small suitcase of baby items she had been collecting in anticipation of the new arrival tiny onesies, soft blankets, a few plush toys. The act of packing these innocent objects for a child who was about to be born into such turmoil wrenched her heart. To her surprise, Andrew was not in the guest house that morning. A staff member informed her he had left early for an urgent meeting. Samantha suppressed a mirthless laugh. Andrew probably had no idea that his wife was about to walk out for good. Perhaps he had gone to Victoria's condo, or maybe he truly had a business emergency. Either way, Samantha didn't care. By mid-afternoon, Samantha's plan was in place. She and Lily would travel to San Diego with Elena, who had driven over as soon as she received Samantha's call. Just as they were loading suitcases into Elena's car, Andrew's sleek Maserati pulled up. He jumped out, alarm flashing across his face at the sight of his wife and daughter preparing to depart. "What's going on?" he demanded, rushing to intercept her. "Where are you taking Lily?" Samantha motioned for Lily to get in the car first, not wanting her daughter to witness the ugliness of this confrontation. Then she squared her shoulders and locked eyes with Andrew. "I'm leaving," she stated, each syllable resonating with finality. "I need space. I can't do this anymore, Andrew." Panic flickered in his gaze. "You can't just take my daughter away from me. We need to talk about custody, about living arrangements." She shook her head. "We're not talking about anything until I'm in a place where I'm not drowning in heartbreak. You can talk to my lawyer if you want. But for now, Lily and I are gone." She placed a hand protectively over her belly. "And this baby comes with me." Andrew stepped closer, forcing her to look into those eyes that once held love for her. "Samantha, I know I've been an idiot. I'm trying to figure things out. Don't do anything rash." "Rash?" She almost laughed. "This is months, maybe years of betrayal, Andrew. Months of secrets, lies, and late-night rendezvous. I gave you my heart, my trust, and you spat on it. I don't care about your confusion anymore. I care about my children's well-being." He struggled to find the right words, and for a second, Samantha thought she saw tears glistening in his eyes. But the memory of him kissing Victoria outside that condo flashed in her mind, and her resolve hardened. Andrew reached out to hold her hand, but she pulled away. "Let's be civil for Lily's sake," she said softly, "but I will not be disrespected. I need time to heal and decide how to move forward." With that, she climbed into the passenger seat next to Elena. Andrew stood frozen, hands balled into fists at his sides. Samantha refused to look back at him as they drove off, focusing instead on Lily's cherubic face in the rearview mirror. The little girl was humming a nursery rhyme, oblivious to the life-altering decision her mother had just made. Samantha's heart pounded with a mix of fear, sorrow, and a sliver of relief. She was stepping into the unknown, severing ties with the life she had painstakingly built with Andrew. But she was also freeing herself from the shackles of betrayal. In that moment, she promised herself she would do whatever it took to protect her children, even if it meant starting over completely. Arriving at her parents' home in San Diego felt like entering another world. The house was a cozy, single-story suburban dwelling with a well-tended garden. Robert and Carol Wilcox welcomed Samantha with open arms, ushering her into the guest bedroom they had prepared. Lily squealed in delight at the sight of a basket filled with toys and coloring books laid out by her grandparents, a thoughtful effort to make her feel at home. Despite her parents' warm hospitality, Samantha felt a surge of conflicting emotions the moment she unpacked her suitcases. She sank onto the bed, pressing a hand to her belly and fighting the urge to cry. She was grateful to have a safe place, but also suffused with an overwhelming sense of failure. This wasn't the life she had envisioned, married to a successful man, raising her children in a mansion, only to end up back in her childhood home, heartbroken and adrift. Elena, seeing Samantha's distress, gently closed the bedroom door behind them. "Hey," she said, sitting beside her sister. "You're not alone, Sam. Mum and Dad have your back. I have your back. And you're doing the right thing for Lily and the baby." Samantha nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. I just never thought I'd be in this position. Andrew and I built a life together. Part of me still can't believe I left. Elena placed a comforting hand on Samantha's shoulder. You had to. You weren't safe there emotionally, psychologically. And the baby needs a stress-free environment. That afternoon, Samantha spoke privately with her father. Robert, with his gruff exterior, tried to keep his anger at Andrew in check. He offered something Samantha did not expect: legal advice. I have a friend, Mark Bennett, Robert said in a calm, measured tone. He's a family law attorney here in San Diego. He'll help you figure out custody, financial support, everything. Samantha's head spun. She had never considered how complicated a potential separation or divorce could be. Andrew might fight me, she said softly, not because he wants me, but because he won't let his public image take a blow. He'll try to spin it, or he might just try to overshadow me with expensive lawyers. Her father's jaw tightened. Then we'll be ready. You're our daughter. I'll do everything in my power to protect you. With her parents' encouragement, Samantha contacted Mark Bennett, arranging a preliminary consultation. Over the phone, Mark provided her with a list of documents she'd need for a possible custody and divorce case: financial records, bank statements, property deeds, prenuptial agreements, if any. Samantha realized she barely knew the full extent of Andrew's holdings. The man had wealth tied up in numerous corporate entities. The task of unraveling the finances felt daunting, but Samantha pressed forward. She had no choice now. Meanwhile, Lily adjusted surprisingly well to her new environment. Perhaps it was the novelty of living with grandparents who doted on her, or maybe the innocence of youth made transitions easier. Every night, Lily insisted Samantha read from the same picture book, Goodnight Moon, just as they used to in Bel Air. The routine was a comforting reminder that some parts of their life remained intact. As the days turned into a week, Andrew's calls became more frequent. Samantha, with her doctor's guidance, had decided to block out stress and negativity as much as possible, but she allowed Lily to speak to her father over video calls. She watched from a distance as Lily chatted excitedly about her new bedroom and the fun she was having with Grandpa Robert. Andrew made several attempts to speak directly with Samantha, but she remained firm. She would only correspond with him through text or email about matters regarding Lily's well-being. Still, curiosity nagged at her. She felt compelled to check social media for any sign of Andrew or Victoria, but she resisted the urge, knowing it would only tear open fresh wounds. One late afternoon, Samantha received an unexpected call from an old friend, Miranda White, who worked in media relations for one of Andrew's philanthropic initiatives. "Hey, Sam," Miranda said hesitantly, "I just wanted you to know there's been some chatter about Andrew and Victoria showing up together at a black tie event last night. Photos are circulating." "I'm so sorry." Samantha swallowed, her heart clenching. She thanked Miranda for letting her know. Though she had left Andrew, hearing that he was gallivanting around with Victoria so openly still stung. She tried to focus on her new reality, preparing for the baby, ensuring Lily remained carefree, and forging a path forward with legal counsel. Yet Andrew's presence loomed like a storm cloud, threatening to pour down at any moment. 2 weeks after arriving in San Diego, Samantha met Mark Bennett in person. He was a tall, soft-spoken man who radiated competence and empathy. They sat in his tastefully decorated office, a shelf of law books looming behind him. Samantha clutched a folder containing the documents she managed to bring from the mansion. Given the evidence of infidelity, Mark began scanning through the folder. You could file for divorce on grounds of adultery. But California is a no-fault divorce state, so the affair won't necessarily grant you a better settlement on that basis alone. though it might influence spousal support and custody considerations, especially if Andrew's behavior impacts the kids' well-being. Samantha nodded, feeling a wave of nerves. Andrew's a millionaire, possibly a billionaire if you consider the entire conglomerate. I don't want to be greedy, but I need enough for Lily and the new baby's future. Mark removed his reading glasses and leaned forward. Understandable. Let's start by requesting financial disclosures. Andrew will be required by law to provide details on all his assets, income, and debts. As for custody, we'll propose a parenting plan that prioritizes your children's best interests. She inhaled deeply. He'll fight. He won't let me go easily. His pride is well. You know how it is with powerful men. Mark offered a reassuring smile. We'll handle it. In the meantime, focus on your health and the pregnancy. Let me handle the legal complexities. That evening, Samantha lay awake in bed, contemplating the enormity of her decision. She felt like she was stepping into a battlefield where Andrew would have every advantage: wealth, connections, a polished public persona. But she also knew she was doing the right thing. Her children deserved a mother who was whole, not shattered by betrayal. Andrew's reaction to the legal papers came swiftly. Within a week of filing, Samantha received a barrage of texts from him, swinging between anger and contrition. One moment he was lashing out, accusing her of overreacting, and the next he was begging for another chance. She found it increasingly difficult to navigate his emotional swings. During one video call with Lily, Andrew requested to speak to Samantha directly. She hesitated, but agreed. Andrew's face filled the screen, a mix of desperation and frustration etched into his features. "How can you drag us into court?" he demanded, voice trembling with barely contained anger. "We have a child together and another on the way. We should work this out amicably. Do you want Lily to grow up in a broken home?" Samantha's cheeks warmed with fury. "It was already broken when you decided to have an affair. I'm not the one who destroyed our marriage, Andrew. We tried talking, but you never let go of Victoria. Don't blame me for doing what I have to do." He ran a hand over his face, sighing. "You don't understand the pressure I'm under. The business is in a precarious position. The board is on edge about the scandal. I'm trying to keep everything from falling apart." Samantha couldn't help the bitter laugh that escaped her. "And what do you think I'm doing, Andrew? I'm pregnant, alone, and trying to build a life for our children away from the chaos you created." They stared at each other through the screen, the silence crackling with unresolved tension. Finally, Andrew ended the call abruptly, leaving Samantha trembling. She had once looked at Andrew as her knight in shining armor. Now he was a man desperate to control a narrative he could no longer manage. Weeks stretched into months, and Samantha's pregnancy advanced. Each day brought new challenges: legal depositions, communication through lawyers, and the emotional toll of severing a marriage she had nurtured for nearly a decade. Yet, amid the turmoil, Samantha found unexpected sources of strength. She began reconnecting with old friends in San Diego and volunteering at a local community center that her mother frequented. Although she was heavily pregnant, she helped organize children's reading programs and basic childcare, finding solace in the laughter of kids. It reminded her of the rewarding work she once pursued as a teacher. Samantha also found support in a small prenatal yoga group. There, she met women from various walks of life, each carrying their own burdens: single mothers, working moms, older first-time mothers. These connections allowed Samantha to share her story and hear others' experiences, breaking the isolation she had felt for months. When she confided in a fellow pregnant mother named Lucy Martinez about Andrew's affair and her ongoing legal battle, Lucy squeezed her hand warmly. "You'll get through this," she said with a supportive smile. "Your baby will be stronger for having a mother who refused to be broken." Days before her due date, Samantha received a call from Mark Bennett. "Good news," he said, sounding relieved. Andrew's team sent an offer for an interim custody and support arrangement. It's not final, but it seems he's willing to cooperate, at least financially. Samantha's hand shook slightly as she held the phone. That's progress. They're suggesting joint legal custody for Lily, with you maintaining primary physical custody. Andrew wants visitation rights, which can be worked out on weekends or through scheduled visits in San Diego. He's also agreed to cover all medical costs for your pregnancy, plus child support. The final settlement will take more negotiation, but this is a positive step. Her eyes filled with tears of relief. It was far from perfect, an entire labyrinth of legalities still awaited. But at least, for now, Andrew was acknowledging his responsibilities. Samantha felt a glimmer of hope that, if nothing else, he would remain a present father to Lily and the baby. That evening, she updated her parents. Robert nodded solemnly, offering a rare smile. Even if Andrew's doing it to save face or appease his board, it's good for you and the kids. Samantha couldn't argue with that. A sense of cautious optimism settled over her, even as she braced for the emotional trials of giving birth without a husband by her side. She allowed herself a tiny spark of happiness, imagining the moment she would hold her newborn in her arms, free from the lies that had once strangled her spirit. Late one night, just a few days before her scheduled due date, Samantha's phone buzzed. It was Andrew. She hesitated, heart pounding, but picked up. "I'm in San Diego," he said, "at a hotel near your parents' place. I need to see you, please." Samantha's mind raced. "Why?" she asked, gripping the phone tighter. "I need to apologize, properly." Against her better judgment, she agreed to meet him at a neutral location, a nearby cafe that closed late. It was a short drive from her parents' house, and though she was heavily pregnant, she felt she needed this final face-to-face conversation before the baby arrived. She found Andrew already seated at a corner table, sipping a cup of coffee. He stood up quickly when she entered, offering to help her sit. Samantha refused, lowering herself carefully into a chair. For a few moments, neither spoke. She noticed that Andrew appeared thinner, dark circles shadowing his eyes. Finally, he cleared his throat. "Sam, you look ready to pop," he said awkwardly, a half smile on his lips. She pressed her lips together. "I'm due any day now," he exhaled, fiddling with his coffee mug. "Listen, I'm sorry for everything I've done. I know that sounds hollow right now, but I need you to know that I regret hurting you." Samantha's eyes glistened with tears she refused to shed. "What do you want from me, Andrew?" He swallowed. "Victoria and I are over. I ended it a few weeks ago. I realized I was using her as an escape from my problems, and it wasn't fair to anyone involved." Samantha raised an eyebrow. "And what? You want a medal? You chose her over me when it mattered." A flash of sorrow crossed his face. "I deserve that. But it's not just about guilt. I still love you, Sam. I'm sorry it took this whole mess for me to see how much I was losing." She felt a pang in her chest, a faint echo of the love she once bore him. "What you're losing," she repeated, voice shaking. "Sometimes we break things so badly they can't be fixed, Andrew. Love alone isn't enough when there's no trust." He reached across the table, hesitating before resting a hand over hers. "Samantha, I'm not expecting you to take me back, but please let me be there for you for the baby. Let me at least try to make amends." For a long moment, Samantha gazed at him, memories flashing, their wedding day under the California sun, the birth of Lily, the night spent dreaming of a future they would build together. Andrew's betrayal had tainted those memories, but it hadn't completely erased them. She withdrew her hand gently. "I'm glad you're taking responsibility," she said, "but I'm not ready to forgive you. I don't know if I ever will. What I do know is that our children deserve a father who's present and honest. For their sake, I'm willing to work out a civil arrangement." Andrew nodded, tears shining in his eyes. "Thank you," he whispered. They parted ways that night with a subdued understanding that their relationship had irrevocably changed. 2 days later, Samantha went into labor in the early morning hours. She rushed to the hospital with her parents at her side, contractions gripping her body in waves of pain. The staff prepped her room, and her sister Elena arrived soon after, offering comforting words and a steady presence. In the throes of labor, Samantha clutched Elena's hand, beads of sweat rolling down her forehead. She cried out as each contraction hit, the physical pain mingling with the emotional intensity of this pivotal moment. After hours of labor, Samantha gave birth to a healthy baby boy. The flood of relief and love that filled her was overwhelming. In that instant, her heartbreak took a backseat to the fierce protection and devotion she felt for this tiny new life. Word reached Andrew, who burst into the hospital, breathless and disheveled, shortly after the baby was born. Samantha was exhausted, still in the delivery room, cradling her newborn. When Andrew entered quietly, he paused at the threshold, tears once again brimming in his eyes. Samantha studied his expression, seeing a raw vulnerability she hadn't seen in years. With a tentative nod, she allowed Andrew to step closer. He approached the bedside and gazed at his son, awe and regret washing over his face. Carefully, she let him hold the baby for a moment. In that silent, fragile truce, both parents acknowledged the new life they had created, the bond that would forever tie them, even if their marriage had fractured beyond repair. Samantha took a trembling breath. She didn't know what the future held, whether they would finalize the divorce or if Andrew would truly change. But for now, she focused on what mattered most, the health of her children and her own newfound resolve. She had walked away from a mansion and a lifestyle many dreamed of, but she had also escaped a web of lies. And in her arms, she held a reason to believe that better days lay ahead. Thank you for joining us on this emotional roller coaster of love, betrayal, and resilience. Samantha's journey proves that even in the face of heartbreak, a person can find the strength to stand up for themselves and protect what truly matters: family, self-worth, and emotional well-being. We witnessed how one woman reclaimed her independence, seeking shelter with loved ones and rebuilding her life while preparing to welcome a new child. Andrew's actions serve as a reminder that trust, once broken, is difficult to mend. Yet, in the darkest moments, there can still be glimpses of redemption and hope for change.
A penthouse overlooking Central Park, a walk-in closet overflowing with Hermes, and a baby on the way. Anya had it all, or so she thought. In the blink of an eye, her billionaire husband, a man who once promised her the world, stood before her, his words colder than the winter wind whipping across their panoramic window. "I want a divorce." But before the ink could dry on the papers, a knock on the door changed everything. His mistress wasn't there to gloat. She was there to expose a secret so dark it would make his demand for a divorce the least of Anya's worries. The scent of blooming peonies and old money filled the air of the penthouse apartment on the 82nd floor of 432 Park Avenue. It was a sterile, curated scent, one that Anya had come to associate with her life, beautiful, expensive, and utterly devoid of the earthy reality she secretly craved. From this height, New York City was a glittering, silent diorama. The yellow cabs were ants, the sprawling green of Central Park, a manicured carpet, and the people, the millions of bustling, striving souls, were entirely insignificant, just like her. Anya traced the rim of her porcelain teacup, the delicate floral pattern a stark contrast to the stark minimalist decor Julian insisted upon. Everything was shades of grey chrome and glass. It was the home of a man who admired his reflections, both literal and financial. He called it uncluttered. Anya called it empty. Her hand drifted down to the gentle swell of her stomach, a 6-month bump that was her only true possession in this sky-high palace. This baby, her baby, was the one vibrant, chaotic, and real thing in her life. It was a secret garden she nurtured within herself, a world away from Julian's meticulous control. Julian Croft. To the world, he was a titan of industry, a visionary in the volatile world of tech mergers and acquisitions. His face, all sharp angles and disarming smiles, graced the covers of Forbes and the Wall Street Journal. He had a Midas touch, turning fledgling startups into billion-dollar unicorns with a flick of his pen. He had swept Anya off her feet 5 years ago. She was a junior art curator, then full of opinions and passion, and he had seemed utterly captivated by her spirit. He'd courted her with the kind of grand cinematic gestures that leave a woman breathless, a private viewing at the Met, a weekend trip to Paris, on a whim a rare first-edition book of poetry she'd once mentioned in passing. He had built a gilded cage for her, and she, dazzled by the shine, had walked right in. She'd given up her small gallery job, her cramped but cozy apartment in the village, and her circle of wonderfully messy artistic friends. Julian had said he wanted to give her the world. She hadn't realized he meant he wanted to become her entire world. The sound of the private elevator chiming its arrival pulled her from her reverie. Julian was home. Early. A knot of unease tightened in her stomach, a feeling that had become increasingly familiar over the past few months. He strode into the living area, looking every inch the master of the universe. His bespoke Tom Ford suit clung perfectly to his athletic frame, his dark hair was impeccably styled, and his face held the neutral, unreadable expression he reserved for high-stakes negotiations. He didn't look at her, his eyes fixed on the panoramic view, as if calculating its net worth. Julian Anya began, her voice softer than she intended. "You're home. I was just about to have the chef start on dinner." He turned then, and the coldness in his eyes extinguished the small flicker of hope in her chest. There was no warmth, no flicker of recognition for his pregnant wife. It was the look he gave a line item on a balance sheet that was underperforming. "Don't bother," he said, his voice flat and clipped. He walked over to the marble bar and poured himself a whiskey, the clink of the decanter against the glass unnaturally loud in the silent room. "We need to talk, Anya." Anya's hand instinctively went back to her belly, a protective gesture. "Is everything all right? Did the deal with the Japanese consortium fall through?" She tried to grasp for a familiar topic, a corner of his life she was still permitted to understand. He took a long swallow of his drink, his throat bobbing. "The deal is fine. Everything in my life is perfectly aligned. Except this." He gestured vaguely between them, an all-encompassing wave that dismissed their 5 years of marriage. Their shared bed, the child growing inside her. This, she whispered, her heart beginning to hammer against her ribs. This marriage, he stated, turning to face her fully. His face was a mask of detached finality. "It's run its course. It no longer serves its purpose. I want a divorce." The words hung in the air, sharp and deadly, like shards of glass from the panoramic window he so admired. Anya felt the blood drain from her face. She must have misheard. This was Julian's idea of a joke, a cruel, power-playing jest to see her squirm. "A divorce," she stammered, a hysterical little laugh escaping her lips. "Julian, what are you talking about?" "I'm pregnant. We're having a baby." "I'm aware of the child's existence," he said, his voice laced with an icy patience that was more terrifying than any shout. "My lawyers have already been instructed to be..." generous. A trust will be established for the child. You will be provided with a settlement that will allow you to live very comfortably. A nice apartment, a staff, whatever you need. You will want for nothing materially. Materially. The word was an insult, a deliberate reduction of her life, her love, her very being to a transaction. The man who had once quoted poetry to her was now liquidating her like a bad asset. I don't want a settlement, Julian. I want my husband. I want the father of my child. Her voice cracked the carefully constructed composure of the perfect wife, shattering into a million pieces. Tears streamed down her face, hot and furious. What has happened to you? What has happened to us? Nothing has happened, he insisted, his calm unwavering. He was a stone wall, impervious to her pain. This was always a contract, Anya. An arrangement. You provided beauty, social grace, a certain aesthetic. I provided a lifestyle beyond your wildest dreams. The contract is now being terminated. A contract. She stared at him aghast. The last 5 years replayed in her mind, now tainted and twisted by his cruel words. Every shared laugh, every tender touch, every whispered promise now felt like a lie, a performance. She felt a wave of nausea so profound it had nothing to do with her pregnancy. She had been a fool, a beautiful, well-kept, blind fool. There's someone else, isn't there? The question was a classic, a cliché she never thought she'd utter. For the first time, a flicker of something crossed his face. Not guilt, but a flicker of annoyance, as if she were a fly buzzing around his head. That's irrelevant to the situation. Irrelevant? She cried, her voice rising. You're throwing me out pregnant with your child, and you tell me your mistress is irrelevant. Who is she, Julian? He walked over to the sleek obsidian desk in the corner and pulled a thick document from a leather briefcase. He tossed it onto the glass coffee table between them. The sound was a final, definitive thud. These are the divorce papers, he said, his voice dropping to a low, menacing tone. My lawyers advise you to sign them without contest. A prolonged, messy battle will not be beneficial for you, or for the public's perception of you. I have a reputation to maintain. He was threatening her. He was threatening to paint her as a gold digger, a shrew, to drag her name through the mud, while he stood pristine on his mountain of money. The cruelty was breathtaking. He wasn't just ending their marriage. He was trying to erase her, to control the very narrative of her existence, even as he expelled her from his. She looked from the papers to his cold, handsome face. The man she loved, or the man she thought she loved, was gone. In his place stood a monster, a creature of pure, unadulterated avarice and ego. A profound, chilling clarity washed over her. The shock receded, replaced by a nascent, unfamiliar anger. No, she said, her voice trembling, but firm. Julian raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. No. I will not sign these. I will not be discarded like one of your failed investments. This child, she said, her hand protectively cradling her belly, deserves a father. And I deserve an explanation. A real one. Julian's jaw tightened. He was not used to being told no. The air crackled with his silent fury. He took a step towards her, his physical presence suddenly feeling overwhelming, threatening. You are making a grave mistake, Anya, he hissed. You have no idea what you're messing with. You have no idea the forces at play here. Sign the papers. Take the money. Disappear quietly. It's the best option for everyone." His words held a hidden weight, a darker undercurrent that went beyond a simple sordid affair. The forces at play here. It wasn't the plea of a man in love with someone else. It was a warning, a threat. Before Anya could respond, before she could decipher the strange, panicked glint in his eyes, the chime of the private elevator echoed through the penthouse once more. Both their heads snapped towards the sound. Julian's face for the first time that evening lost its composure. A flash of pure, unadulterated panic crossed his features so quick that Anya almost missed it. He looked trapped. "Who is that?" Anya asked, her own confusion mounting. They weren't expecting anyone. Julian guarded their privacy with a zeal that bordered on paranoid. "Don't." Julian breathed his eyes wide as he stared at the elevator doors. It wasn't a command to Anya, but a desperate plea to the universe. The polished steel doors slid open with a soft, expensive sigh. Standing in the doorway was a woman. She was breathtakingly beautiful, with raven black hair cut into a sharp, severe bob, and eyes the color of emeralds. She wore a crimson dress that clung to her like a second skin, a stark, bloody slash of color in the monochrome world of Julian's penthouse. Anya's heart stopped. It had to be her. The mistress. She had come to gloat, to witness the final destruction of the wife to claim her prize. Anya braced herself for the humiliation, the final crushing blow. But the woman's eyes weren't on Anya. They were locked on Julian, and they held no trace of triumph. Her beautiful face was pale. Her hands were trembling, and her emerald eyes were wide with a terror that mirrored the panic on Julian's face. She took a shaky step into the room. "Julian," the woman, said, her voice a ragged whisper that cut through the silence. "It's over. They know. They know everything." Julian stared at her, his mask of control utterly shattered. He looked like a man staring at his own ghost. Anya looked back and forth between her husband and this beautiful, terrified stranger. A cold dread far deeper and more terrifying than the pain of betrayal began to creep up her spine. This wasn't about a simple affair. Julian's strange warning, his panic, this woman's fear, it was all connected to something far bigger. The divorce papers lay on the table, forgotten. The gilded cage had just burst open, but Anya had a sickening feeling that she hadn't been set free. She had just been tossed into the fire. The woman in the crimson dress took another hesitant step into the cavernous living room. Her designer heels, which should have clicked with authority on the polished marble floor, were instead unnervingly silent, as if she were trying to retract her own presence. Anya's mind, still reeling from the whiplash of the divorce demand, struggled to process this new bizarre tableau. The mistress, for who else could she be, wasn't acting like a victor. She was acting like a fugitive. "Isabel, what the hell are you doing here?" Julian finally managed to say, his voice a strangled rasp. He shot a venomous glare at her, a look that was less about a spurned lover and more about a co-conspirator who had broken rank. He moved almost unconsciously to position himself between Isabel and Anya, a futile attempt to control the flow of information. "I tried to call you Isabel," said her voice, trembling. She ignored Anya completely, her gaze fixed on Julian's increasingly frantic expression. "Your phone was off. I left a dozen messages with your secretary. I had to come. We don't have any time." "Time for what?" Anya interjected, her voice finding a new steely edge. The initial shock was beginning to curdle into suspicion. "Time to coordinate your stories before you throw me out." Isabel's head snapped towards Anya, and for the first time she seemed to truly see her. There was no malice in her emerald eyes, no smug superiority. Instead, Anya saw a flicker of something that looked unnervingly like pity. It was an expression that infuriated Anya more than any taunt could have. "This has nothing to do with your marriage," Isabel said, with a dismissive wave of her hand that was so absolute it was chilling. "That's just collateral damage. A loose end he was trying to tie up." "A loose end." Anya repeated the words, tasting like ash. She looked at Julian, whose face was now a ghastly shade of pale. "Is that what I am to you, Julian? A loose end?" "Shut up!" Isabel Julian roared, finally losing the last vestige of his icy control. He lunged towards her, grabbing her arm. "You shouldn't be here. We had a plan. The plan is shot to hell." "Julian." Isabel wrenched her arm free, her fear momentarily eclipsed by a surge of anger. "The plan went up in smoke the moment my brother's name appeared on the SEC's inquiry list this morning. The acronym hung in the air, SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission. The federal agency that policed Wall Street, the boogeyman of every high-flying financier. It was a name Anya knew from the headlines from the periphery of Julian's world, but it had never felt real, never had any bearing on her curated life. Until now. What SEC inquiry, Anya demanded, stepping forward. She was no longer just a passive victim in a domestic drama. She was an unwilling participant in something far more sinister. "Julian, what is she talking about?" "She's talking nonsense." Julian spat, his eyes darting around the room as if searching for an escape route that didn't exist 82 floors in the sky. "She's hysterical. Her brother made some bad investments, and now she's panicking and trying to drag me into it. He was trying to rebuild his wall of composure, but the cracks were showing. His hands were trembling, and a thin sheen of sweat had broken out on his forehead. Bad investments." Isabel let out a sharp, bitter laugh that held no humor. "Is that what you call it? You used him. Julian, you used my family's brokerage firm as a shield. You ran the entire scheme through their accounts. Made them look like the masterminds while you stayed clean. Scheme." The word was a poison dart. Anya's gaze swung back to Julian. His entire empire, his Midas touch, was it all just a trick? A lie, just like their marriage? "I don't know what you're talking about," he said, his voice low and threatening as he took a step towards Isabel. "And I suggest you leave now before you say something you'll regret." "No." Isabel stood her ground, her chin held high. The fear was still there, but it was now bolstered by a desperate, cornered resolve. "I'm not taking the fall for you. My brother is not going to prison for you. I loved you, Julian, or I thought I did. But I see what you are now. You don't love anyone. You consume them. You use them up, and then you discard the husk." Her eyes flickered to Anya. "She knows." "Don't you?" Anya thought back. The last 6 months, Julian's increasing secrecy, his late nights at the office, which she had assumed were due to his affair, the strange hushed phone calls he would take in his study, ending them abruptly if she walked in, the way he had systematically isolated her, severing her ties to her old friends, even discouraging visits from her own family, claiming he wanted to protect her peace and privacy during her pregnancy. It hadn't been about protecting her. It had been about isolating a witness. What scheme, Julian Anya's voice was dangerously quiet. The tears were gone. In their place was a cold, terrifying calm. "What did you do?" "Anya, listen to me," Julian said, turning to her, his voice attempting a gentleness that now sounded grotesque and manipulative. "She's a scorned woman. She's trying to ruin me because I ended our affair. It's the oldest story in the book. You're my wife. You're the mother of my child. It's you I'm trying to protect." He was trying to play her to use their shared history and their unborn child as a shield. But the spell was broken. She could see the puppeteer's strings. "Protect," she repeated, her voice dripping with scorn. "By demanding a divorce an hour ago, by calling me a loose end, you needed to tie up. You weren't trying to protect me. You were trying to cut me loose before the ship sank, weren't you? You wanted to make sure I couldn't claim a single cent of your precious, dirty money when it all came crashing down." The truth of it hit her with the force of a physical blow. The divorce wasn't about his love for Isabel. It was a calculated financial maneuver. A preemptive strike in a war he knew was coming. He was willing to make his own pregnant wife a refugee from his life to save himself. "It's called a SPAC," Isabel said. Suddenly, her voice sharp and clear. She was no longer speaking just to Julian, but to Anya, to the room, to the universe. She was confessing. "A special purpose acquisition company. It's the cleanest grift on Wall Street right now." Anya had heard Julian talk about SPACs. He'd called them blank check companies, a faster, more efficient way to take a private company, public bypassing the rigorous scrutiny of a traditional IPO. He had launched 3 of them in the last 2 years, raising billions from investors eager to get in on the ground floor of his next big thing. The media had lauded him as an innovator. Your husband, Isabel, continued, her voice gaining a morbid momentum, is a master at selling dreams. He would launch a SPAC, promising to merge it with a revolutionary tech company. The hype alone would send the stock soaring. Investors from massive hedge funds to ordinary people would pour their life savings into it all, based on his reputation. She paused, taking a shaky breath. But there was no company, Anya. There was never any revolutionary tech. It was all smoke and mirrors. A shell game. Julian lunged for her again. "You're lying, am I?" Isabel sidestepped him, her eyes burning with a righteous fury. "Tell her about Project Chimera, Julian. Tell her about the next-gen AI integration platform that was going to change the world. Show her the fancy prospectus, the one with the fabricated data and the photoshopped pictures of a non-existent office in Silicon Valley." She turned back to Anya, her voice dropping. "The money from the investors. It wasn't used for acquisitions. It was funneled, laundered through a complex web of offshore accounts and shell corporations, one of which was my brother's unwitting firm. Julian would skim off hundreds of millions, paying off early investors with money from new ones to keep the illusion going. It's a classic Ponzi scheme, Anya just dressed up in a fancy Wall Street suit. And the whole thing is about to collapse." Anya stared at Julian, waiting for him to deny it, to rage, to offer some plausible explanation. But he said nothing. He simply stood there, breathing heavily, the cornered animal, the master of the universe, brought low by a single unraveling thread. The entire foundation of her life, the penthouse, the clothes, the art, the security was not just built on lies, but on theft, on the stolen dreams and life savings of countless unknown people. She felt a dizzying vertigo, the floor seeming to drop away beneath her. Her hand flew to her stomach to the one pure thing in this world of deceit. This child, her son or daughter, was heir to a fortune that didn't exist, a legacy of shame. So the divorce. Anya trailed off, the full, monstrous picture becoming clear. The settlement you offered me, that generous trust for our little child. Where was that money coming from, Julian? He finally looked at her, and in his eyes she saw the dark, terrifying truth. "It's the last of the clean money, isn't it?" she whispered in horror. "The money you had before all this started. You were trying to firewall it, to put it in my name and the baby's name so the SEC couldn't touch it when they came for the rest. You weren't giving me a gift. You were using your pregnant wife and your unborn child as a money mule." The silence that followed was a confession. It was the most damning sound Anya had ever heard. The man she had married was not just a cheat or a liar. He was a predator of the highest order, and he had just tried to make her his final accomplice. The doorbell chimed, not the private elevator this time, but the main service door to the apartment. A loud, insistent official buzzing. It was a sound none of them could ignore. Julian, Isabel, and Anya all froze, their three-person drama instantly rendered insignificant. This was no longer a private implosion. The outside world was knocking. Julian's eyes, wide with terror, met Anya's. The last shred of his bravado was gone, replaced by the primal fear of a man whose time had run out. The buzzing came again, longer this time, more demanding. "Don't answer it," Julian whispered, a desperate, futile command. But Anya was already walking towards the door. The fog of her shock and betrayal was beginning to clear, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. She had been a pawn in his game for far too long. The game was over. Her hand closed around the cold steel handle of the door. Whatever was on the other side, it was the beginning of her new reality. She had to face it, for herself and for the child she carried. She pulled the door open. Standing in the hallway were two men in dark, conservative suits. They were nondescript, their faces impassive, but they carried an aura of unshakable authority that made the air in the multi-million-dollar penthouse feel cheap and thin. One of them held up a badge and an official-looking document. Julian Croft, the lead agent, asked, his voice calm and professional, but with an underlying steel that tolerated no argument. His eyes flicked past Anya to where Julian stood frozen in the middle of the living room. "I'm Agent Miller with the FBI. We have a warrant to search these premises." The FBI. The letters seemed to suck all the remaining oxygen out of the room. It was one thing to hear the acronym SEC from a panicked Mistress. It was another to see the flesh and blood embodiment of a federal investigation standing on your doorstep. Julian looked as if he had been turned to stone. The blood had drained from his face, leaving behind a waxy grey pallor. He stared at the agents, his mouth slightly agape. The master manipulator suddenly a speechless puppet. Isabel let out a small, choked sob and sank onto one of the ridiculously expensive minimalist sofas, her crimson dress pooling around her like a stain. The fight had gone out of her, replaced by the grim resignation of someone who had pulled the pin on a grenade and was now simply waiting for the blast. Agent Miller and his partner stepped into the apartment, their sensible shoes making solid, real-world sounds on the marble floor. Anya stepped back, a strange sense of detachment washing over her. She was watching a movie of her own life imploding. The agent's eyes swept the room, cataloguing the art, the furniture, the view, not with admiration, but with the cold appraisal of an asset seizure. "We also have a warrant for your arrest." "Mr. Croft." Agent Miller continued in the same dispassionate tone, pulling a pair of handcuffs from his belt. For conspiracy to commit securities fraud, wire fraud, and money laundering. The words were a death sentence, a formal indictment of everything Isabel had just revealed. The Ponzi scheme project chimera. The stolen money, it was all real. And now the consequences were real too. "This is a mistake," Julian finally stammered, his voice weak and unconvincing. "My lawyers. Your lawyers have been notified." Agent Miller cut him off smoothly. "They can meet you downtown. Please place your hands behind your back." The sight of Julian Croft, the titan of Wall Street, the man whose confident smirk had sold billions in fraudulent dreams, being handcuffed in his own living room, was surreal. The metallic click of the cuffs locking into place was the final definitive sound of his world ending. He didn't resist. The fight was gone, replaced by a hollow-eyed shock. As the second agent began to lead Julian towards the door, Isabel suddenly stood up, her face streaked with tears, but her voice filled with a new urgent terror. "Wait!" she cried out, her voice sharp. "That's not all. That's not the real reason." Agent Miller paused, turning to her with a look of mild professional interest. "The real reason for what, ma'am?" "For the divorce," she said, pointing a trembling finger at Julian. "For why he had to get her out. It's not just about the money. There's something else. Something worse." Anya, who had been standing silently by the wall, felt a new wave of ice-cold dread. Worse. What could possibly be worse than a billion-dollar fraud that had ruined countless lives? What was the dark secret that even a massive financial crime was meant to cover up? Julian's head snapped up. He shot a look at Isabel, a look of pure murderous rage mixed with desperate pleading. "Isabel, no. Don't. I have to," she sobbed. "They need to know everything. They need to know why you were so desperate." She turned to the agents, her words tumbling out in a frantic, disjointed rush. "The SPACs. The fraud. That was the end game. But it started somewhere else. It started with his first company. Gen Tech Solutions." Anya vaguely remembered the name. It was the company Julian had founded before they met the one that had given him his initial millions and launched his reputation as a tech prodigy. He had sold it for a massive profit years ago. "What about it?" Agent Miller asked, his patience clearly wearing thin. Gentech's flagship product was a proprietary data encryption software, Isabel explained, her voice gaining clarity as she forced the story out. It was sold to dozens of high-level corporate clients, banks, law firms, private equity funds. They promised impenetrable security. She took a deep breath, her eyes locking onto Anya's. The pity was back in her gaze, but now it was deeper, darker, filled with a horror that Anya couldn't yet comprehend. But it wasn't an encryption software, Anya. It was a key. Julian built a back door into the system, a master key that gave him access to everything. For years, he had a live feed into the most sensitive corporate data in the country. Mergers and acquisitions plans, confidential legal strategies, insider trading information. The scale of it was dizzying. Julian hadn't just been a con artist. He had been a digital phantom, a ghost in the machine, systematically stealing the lifeblood of the corporate world. That's how he made his first fortune. Isabel continued, her voice dropping to a near whisper. It wasn't genius. It was theft on an industrial scale. He knew which companies were going to be acquired before they did. He knew which stocks would soar and which would plummet. He wasn't predicting the market. He was reading the script. The agents exchanged a look. This was new information. This went beyond the SPACs. This was the origin story of his entire criminal enterprise. But that's still not the secret. Isabel choked out, tears streaming down her face again. That's just more fraud. Then what is it? Anya finally spoke, her voice a hollow echo in the room. She had to know. She had to know the final, terrible truth that was poisoning the very air she breathed. Isabel's gaze was fixed on Anya's pregnant belly. 2 years ago, one of the companies he was spying on, a pharmaceutical firm called Biovance, they were on the verge of a major breakthrough, a revolutionary new gene therapy treatment. But they had a problem. Their final human trials were showing some irregularities, dangerous side effects that they were trying to solve before announcing the drug. Julian was now shaking his head violently, his muffled pleas ignored by the agent holding him. "Don't say it, Isabel. Please." Julian knew the drug was flawed. Isabel forged on her voice, cracking with the weight of her confession. He had access to the raw, hidden data. He knew it was dangerous. But he also knew that if another company acquired Biovance before the flaws were public, the stock would triple overnight. So he used his insider information. He leaked the news of the potential breakthrough without mentioning the dangerous side effects to a rival corporation. They initiated a hostile takeover, and Julian, having bought millions in Biovance stock beforehand, made a fortune. Over $200 million in a single week. That's insider trading. A huge case, but Agent Miller prompted. But it wasn't just insider trading. Isabel screamed, the sound raw and agonizing. The new company, eager to recoup their investment, rushed the drug to market. They buried the flawed data. They pushed it through a compromised approval process. The drug was called Viridia. Anya's blood ran cold. Viridia. The name was a lightning bolt, a searing brand on her memory. It was prescribed as an advanced fertility treatment. Isabel whispered, her eyes locked on Anya's. For couples who had tried everything else, it was hailed as a miracle drug. Anya's hand, the one not pressed against her stomach, flew to her mouth. No, it couldn't be. The room began to spin. The minimalist grey walls seemed to close in on her. She and Julian had struggled to conceive. For 2 years they had been through a heart-breaking cycle of hope and disappointment. Doctors had found no specific issue, just unexplained infertility. Then a year ago, a new specialist, a top doctor recommended by Julian himself, had suggested a new cutting-edge treatment. A miracle drug from Europe, he had called it. Its name was Viridia. Anya stared at Julian, at the man she had married, the man whose child she was carrying, the man who had looked on with what she thought was shared joy when the pregnancy test finally came back positive. But it hadn't been joy. It had been the culmination of a monstrous plan. The side effects, Anya could barely form the words. Her throat was tight with terror. What were the side effects? Julian finally broke. A guttural, animalistic sob tore from his chest. Anya, I'm sorry. I can fix it. We have money. The best doctors. Isabel gave the final brutal answer, her voice devoid of all emotion, a flat line of horror. It worked. The drug allowed women to conceive. That part was true. But the hidden data from the original trials showed that in nearly 80% of cases, the fetus would develop a rare and fatal neurological disorder. Most didn't survive the 3rd trimester. Those who were born didn't live past their 1st year. The world went silent. The agents, the handcuffs, the penthouse, it all dissolved into an indistinct blur. The only thing that was real was the life kicking inside her. A life she had craved, a life she had celebrated, a life that had been conceived through a monstrous lie, a poison given to her by the man she loved. This was the dark secret. The divorce wasn't about protecting his money. It was about severing all ties before his child was born with the fatal condition he himself had knowingly unleashed upon the world. He wasn't trying to disown a wife. He was trying to outrun a death sentence. He was trying to erase the ultimate evidence of his crime, his own dying child. Anya looked at her husband, the father of her child, the architect of her destruction. He was no longer a man. He was a void, a black hole of greed and ambition that had consumed everything, including the life of his own unborn baby. The strength drained from her legs. The room tilted violently, the glittering view of Central Park spinning into a nauseating vortex. As her knees buckled and the world faded to black, the last thing she heard was the distant hollow sound of her own scream. Anya awoke to a world bleached of all color. The first sensation was not sight, but smell. A sharp, aggressive scent of antiseptic that scoured her nostrils and bore no resemblance to the curated peony and old money fragrance of her former life. The second was sound, the soft, insistent, and terrifyingly rhythmic beep of a machine somewhere to her left. For a fleeting, merciful moment, she was adrift in a sea of disorientation, the horrors of the previous evening feeling like the suffocating remnants of a fever dream. Had it been real? The cold words, the crimson dress, the click of handcuffs. Then, with the force of a physical impact, the memories crashed back in. Viridia. The name detonated in her mind a single word that contained a universe of betrayal. It was the name of the drug. The poison, the monstrous lie she had welcomed into her body. A raw, guttural sob tore itself from her throat, and her hand, trembling uncontrollably, flew to her stomach. The gentle, reassuring swell was still there, a fragile vessel in a venomous sea. Was her baby the one pure thing she had left already a ghost? Easy now, Mrs. Croft. Take a deep breath. A calm, steady voice pierced through the fog of her panic. A woman in navy blue scrubs her face, a welcome portrait of professional kindness, was adjusting the IV drip in Anya's arm. You fainted. We brought you straight to Lenox Hill Hospital. We've been monitoring you and the baby. The baby, Anya's voice, was a ragged whisper, a thread of sound in the cavernous silence of her fear. She couldn't bring herself to ask the real question, the one that clawed at the inside of her skull. Is it dying? The nurse's eyes softened with understanding. The baby is fine, she said, her words deliberate and clear. A little stressed when you were brought in, but the heartbeat is strong and steady now. Your own heart rate is elevated, which is understandable. You've had a severe shock. The baby is strong. 4 simple words. They were not a cure, not a promise, but they were a lifeline. In the raging flood of her shattered reality, Anya clung to them as if they were the last solid ground on earth. Her baby was a fighter. It was already more than its father had ever been. I need to see a doctor, Anya managed, pushing herself up slightly. The effort made the room spin. A specialist, not just an OB, a geneticist, someone who understands. I need to know everything." Her voice broke on the last word. She needed to know the shape of the monster she was facing. "We've already paged the head of our maternal fetal medicine department, Dr. Elena Ramirez." The nurse reassured her, fluffing a thin pillow behind her head. "She's the best. She'll be here to speak with you shortly. For now, just try to breathe." Rest was an impossible luxury. Her mind was a torture chamber, replaying Julian's face, twisting in panic, the cold finality of the FBI agent's voice, and Isabel's horrified confession over and over. The entire architecture of her life, a magnificent structure she had once admired, had been revealed as a criminal enterprise, a house of cards built on stolen dreams. And the final, most intimate, most unspeakable betrayal was swimming in her very womb, conceived from a miracle that was in truth a time bomb. As the nurse left to give her a moment, another figure appeared hesitantly in the doorway. It was Isabel. She had shed the blood-red dress, the armor of Julian's mistress, and now wore a simple, anonymous pair of jeans and a grey sweater. Her face was scrubbed clean of makeup, revealing the faint purple smudges of exhaustion beneath her eyes. The emerald fire in her irises had been banked, leaving a weary, sorrowful glow. Anya's body tensed. A primal part of her wanted to scream at this woman, the beautiful harbinger of her apocalypse. But the anger felt distant, a secondary emotion, muted by the all-consuming terror of Julian's ultimate sin. Isabel wasn't the enemy. She was just another piece of scorched debris in the blast radius of Julian Croft. "What do you want?" Anya asked, her voice raspy, devoid of accusation, but heavy with exhaustion. I came to see if you were all right," Isabel said, her voice barely a whisper. She hovered by the door, a respectful distance away, as if acknowledging she was trespassing on sacred ground of grief. "And to tell you, I told them everything." Anya remained silent, watching her. "The agents at the penthouse," Isabel clarified, twisting a loose thread on her sweater. "After they took you, I stayed for hours. I told them about Viridia, about the Bio-Vance data, about Julian's back door into Gentech. I gave them the offshore account numbers he'd bragged about, the server locations he thought were hidden. Everything I knew. My brother is working with them too. He's turning over every record from his firm. He's terrified, but he wants to make it right." Why Anya's question was genuine, a flicker of curiosity in the darkness. Why not just disappear? He would have given you money to run. Isabel finally met her gaze, and Anya saw the profound depth of her self-loathing. Because he was going to let my brother, my family, take the fall for a crime he masterminded. That was the first crack in the fantasy. But the moment I found out about Viridia, the real truth of it, I looked at him, Julian, the man I thought I loved, and I saw a void. It wasn't just greed, Anya. What kind of person knowingly condemns unborn children for profit? It was a level of evil I couldn't comprehend. Her eyes flickered to Anya's stomach. When he told me he was divorcing you, I knew why. He was running from the evidence, from his own child. And I knew you were pregnant, but I didn't know about the drug. Not until my brother's lawyer uncovered the connection. The thought of you, going through the rest of your pregnancy celebrating only to face that. She shook her head, a tear tracing a path down her pale cheek. I couldn't live with myself. I couldn't let you be the last one to know the truth. It was the only thing I could do to claw back a single shred of my own soul. In that moment, Anya saw past the affair, past the label of mistress. She saw another woman who had been utterly conned, another life consumed by Julian's insatiable ego. They were bound by a strange, twisted sisterhood forged in the fires of his spectacular destruction. They've frozen everything. Isabel added her voice, flat and emotionless. Every asset. The penthouse is a federal crime scene. The accounts are locked. The cars, the art, the watches, it's all gone. Evidence in the largest fraud case in a decade. His lawyers are saying the evidence is insurmountable. He'll never see the outside of a prison cell again. Good, a cold, hard part of Anya thought. Let him rot. But the satisfaction was hollow, a fleeting warmth in an Arctic landscape of pain. Julian's imprisonment couldn't reverse time, couldn't purify the poison. The door opened again, and a woman with intelligent, compassionate eyes and an air of calm authority entered the room. Mrs. Croft. I'm Dr. Ramirez. With a final lingering look of profound regret, Isabel quietly slipped out of the room, leaving Anya to face her new reality. The next hour was a clinical, terrifying blur of medical terminology, consent forms, and agonizing questions. Dr. Ramirez was a miracle of empathy and professionalism. She explained the process for an advanced diagnostic amniocentesis, carefully and patiently outlining the procedure, the risks, and the stark reality of the potential results. She didn't offer false hope, only facts. And for that, Anya was grateful. I have to know, Dr. Anya pleaded, her composure finally crumbling under the clinical weight of it all. Whatever it is, I have to know what I'm facing. We will get you answers, Dr. Ramirez promised, her hand briefly resting on Anya's arm. The simple human touch was grounding. As quickly and as safely as we possibly can. The days that followed were a unique form of purgatory. Anya remained in the hospital, a voluntary prisoner in a sterile white room, while the world outside feasted on the carcass of her old life. The news of Julian's arrest had gone supernova. Wall Street Wunderkind, or Ponzi King, screamed the cable news chyrons. His smug, handsome face was plastered everywhere, the poster boy for catastrophic hubris. The stories detailed the SPAC's fraud in lurid detail, but the darkest secret, the corporate evil of Viridia, remained a tightly sealed component of the federal case, a horror not yet fit for public consumption. Anya refused all visitors, save for her parents, who flew in immediately, their faces etched with a pain that mirrored her own. She hired a team of lawyers, not to fight for a share of Julian's blood money, but to meticulously expunge him from her life. To dissolve the marriage, to legally and financially firewall her child from the toxic Croft name and its indelible legacy of shame. She existed in a state of suspended animation, the week-long wait for the test results, stretching into an eternity. She didn't sleep, she merely drifted in and out of consciousness. In her waking hours, she would stare out the window at the city, a city that now seemed alien to her. Every pregnant woman she saw, every baby in a stroller was a stab to the heart. She was suspended between a life that was over and a future that was too terrifying to contemplate. Finally, the day came. Dr. Ramirez entered her room alone, closing the door softly behind her. She held a file, and her expression was calm, professional, and utterly unreadable. Anya's heart began to pound, a frantic, desperate rhythm against her ribs. This was it, the precipice. She gripped her own hands over her belly, a protective gesture that felt painfully inadequate. Dr. Ramirez sat in the chair beside the bed, opened the file but didn't look at it. She looked directly at Anya. "We have the results from the full genomic sequencing panel," she said, her voice even. Anya held her breath, bracing for the impact for the words that would shatter the final fragments of her world. Dr. Ramirez took a slow, deliberate breath. "Anya, your baby is perfectly healthy." The words didn't register. They were a language she had forgotten how to speak. Anya just stared at her mind a blank slate of incomprehension. "What? No. That's not possible." "Viridia, the neurological degradation." "I know," the doctor said gently, her professional calm finally breaking into a warm, reassuring smile. "We read the federal case files your lawyers managed to get unsealed for us. We knew the exact rare genetic markers we were looking for, and they are not there. We ran the test twice to be certain. He is completely, unequivocally unaffected. He." Her mind snagged on the word. "He. You're having a son." Anya Dr. Ramirez confirmed, her eyes shining. "A healthy baby boy." The dam broke. A sound, a wail that was equal parts grief and joy, tore from deep inside her. It was the sound of a week of terror, of months of unknowing, of a lifetime of betrayal, being washed away by a single miraculous wave of relief. The tears came, then hot and cleansing, pouring down her face as she finally truly let go. But how she sobbed, her body shaking. Isabel said, 80%. 80% is not 100%, the doctor said, softly, her voice thick with emotion. It means 20%, 1 in 5 were spared. It's a game of Russian roulette, played with the most precious stakes imaginable. It's a monstrous, unforgivable gamble. But Anya, you and your son, you won. She won. It wasn't a victory over Julian. It was a victory over fate, over poison, over the darkness that had tried to claim her future. Anya checked out of the hospital the next morning. The world looked different, the colors more vibrant, the air cleaner. The Julian Croft penthouse on Park Avenue was sealed a monument to a dead life. She walked away from it without a backward glance. With a small, life-saving loan from her parents, she found a modest 2-bedroom apartment in Brooklyn's Park Slope. It was a world away from the silent, sterile grandeur she had known. From her window, she saw not a curated park, but a living one. She could hear the joyful shrieks of children playing, the friendly bark of dogs, the distant, reassuring rumble of the F-train. It was the chaotic, beautiful symphony of real life. She spent the final peaceful months of her pregnancy rebuilding. She bought a second-hand crib and painted the nursery a cheerful, sunny yellow. She reconnected with her old circle of wonderfully messy, artistic friends who enveloped her in a cocoon of unconditional love and support, never once mentioning her notorious past. They brought her soup, helped her assemble furniture, and made her laugh, truly laugh for the first time in years. 3 months later, Leo Alexander was born, weighing 7 pounds 2 ounces. He was loud, demanding, and utterly perfect. He had her eyes and a stubborn tuft of dark hair. Holding him for the first time, skin to skin, feeling his tiny, fragile fingers instinctively curl around hers, Anya felt a love so vast and powerful it rearranged her entire universe. This was real wealth. This was a legacy. One rainy afternoon as a 2-week-old, Leo slept soundly on her chest. A news alert popped up on her phone. Julian Croft sentenced. She read that faced with an avalanche of evidence and Isabel's unshakable testimony, He had accepted a plea bargain to avoid having the full horrific details of the Viridia scandal made public in a trial. He was sentenced to 150 years in a federal supermax facility with no possibility of parole. Anya looked down at her sleeping son, his chest rising and falling in a steady, peaceful rhythm. She felt no hatred for Julian, no desire for revenge. She felt nothing at all. He was a ghost, the antagonist of a story that was already over. Her story and Leo's was just beginning. Her life was no longer defined by the man she had lost, but by the son she had almost lost and had miraculously gained. She was not the millionaire's disgraced wife. She was Leo's mother, and in the quiet, sun-drenched world of her small Brooklyn apartment, she was the richest woman in the world. Anya's story is a harrowing journey from a gilded cage to true freedom. It's a reminder that wealth can be a mask for unimaginable darkness, and that true strength isn't found in penthouses or designer clothes, but in the fierce, unyielding power of a mother's love. She lost a life of luxury, but gained a life of purpose, proving that even after the most devastating betrayals, we have the power to rise from the ashes and build a new world for ourselves and for our children. Her story isn't just about the downfall of a wicked man, but the rise of an unbreakable woman. If this story moved you, please hit that like button. Share it with someone who needs a reminder of their own strength, and don't forget to subscribe for more tales of drama resilience and ultimate justice. Let us know in the comments what you think of Anya's incredible journey.